My family believed my sister's lie that I slept with her fiancé, disowned me, and let me rot. Now they want me to save them from homelessness. So I let them lose everything. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. Before I get into the heart of what happened, you need to understand the world I came from. You need to see the perfect, shimmering snow globe of my life before my own family picked it up and shattered it on the floor. For the first 22 years of my existence, I was Adeline, the daughter every parent in our affluent Cleveland suburb wished they had. I grew up in a sprawling colonial house on a street lined with ancient oak trees, in a world where appearances weren't just important, they were everything. My parents, Richard and Carol, were masters of illusion. On the surface, they were the perfect couple, the pillar of the community. My father was a senior partner at a prestigious downtown law firm, a man whose quiet authority could command a courtroom and whose yearly salary ensured our lives were cushioned from any of life's harsh realities. I remember him boasting at a dinner party once, swirling a glass of expensive red wine. "Adeline's going to be a surgeon," he announced to our neighbors. "Can you imagine the life she'll have? We've made sure of it." That was my father. My life was his accomplishment, a testament to his success. My mother, Carol, was the true artist. Her part-time work in interior design was just a hobby. Her real, all-consuming career was the curation of this sterling family image. She orchestrated our lives like a frantic conductor, ensuring every note was perfect. Our family Christmas card was a production that started in August, involving coordinated outfits and a professional photographer. She sat on 3 different charity boards, co-chaired the PTA, and knew the name of every person of influence in a 50-mile radius. I remember one afternoon, she spent 2 hours adjusting a family portrait on the wall, convinced it was a millimeter off-center. "Perfection isn't an accident, Adeline," she'd told me, her voice taut with concentration. "It's a choice." And I was her masterpiece. I was their biological daughter, the golden child, living proof of their perfect choices. I didn't just get good grades, I was the valedictorian. I didn't just get into college, I earned a full academic scholarship for a competitive pre-med program, which meant the hefty college fund they'd saved could be used for, as my mother put it, more visible investments. I was the captain of the university's debate team, a dedicated volunteer at the pediatric wing of the local hospital, and I possessed a calm, polite demeanor that charmed adults and made other parents cluck their tongues in admiration. I wasn't a rebel. My version of breaking the rules was staying at the library an hour past curfew to study for an organic chemistry exam. My path was a brightly lit highway leading directly to the American dream: become a doctor, marry a lawyer or a banker, have 2 perfect children, and buy a bigger house on an even nicer street. That was the plan. It was the only plan I had ever known. Into this meticulously crafted world came Delilah. She was 3 when my parents adopted her, I was 10. Her biological parents had died in a horrific car crash, and my mother framed the adoption as our family's greatest act of benevolence. It was a story she told often at her charity luncheons, a way to add a layer of noble suffering and compassion to our otherwise flawless narrative. The day they brought her home, she was a fragile, silent little thing, all wide, terrified eyes and tangled hair. My 10-year-old heart ached for her. I vowed to be the best big sister imaginable, to protect her and make her feel safe. For many years, I truly tried. I taught her how to read, how to ride a bike. I let her tag along with my friends, even when they rolled their eyes. But as we entered our teenage years, a subtle poison began to seep into our relationship. The spotlight I had so effortlessly commanded now had to be shared. Everything became a competition for attention. If I aced an exam, Delilah would develop a mysterious illness that required my mother's constant care. If I won a debate tournament, she would have a dramatic falling out with a friend that consumed all the family's emotional energy for a week. I told myself it was the trauma she'd endured. I made excuses for her. When she was in 9th grade, she came home in tears, claiming a group of popular girls were bullying her. I stormed into the school the next day, met with the principal, and defended her fiercely, only to find out later that Delilah had started the whole conflict by spreading a nasty rumor. My parents just sighed and said she was sensitive. Looking back, the warning signs were everywhere, blinking like neon signs in a fog I was too loyal to see through. Her jealousy was a constant, simmering thing. Once, for my 17th birthday, my parents gave me a delicate silver locket that had belonged to my grandmother. At my party, Delilah accidentally knocked a full glass of red punch all over my white dress while I was opening gifts. As my mother rushed me upstairs to try and salvage the dress, Delilah took center stage, tearfully apologizing to all my friends, becoming the tragic, clumsy victim of the moment. She thrived on drama, she manufactured it, breathed it. Then came Garrett. He was a year older than Delilah, the handsome, popular captain of the high school football team. He fell for Delilah's persona completely, the fragile, beautiful girl who needed protecting. He was a decent guy, I suppose, but weak-willed and utterly under her spell. He was always a little nervous around me. I think my ambition and focus made him uncomfortable. We had nothing in common, but for Delilah's sake, I was always friendly and polite. Their engagement was announced when Delilah was just 17. It was ridiculously young, but my parents were ecstatic. Garrett's family was well known, and the union was, in my mother's eyes, a brilliant strategic merger. Delilah was in her element, planning a lavish wedding, showing off the diamond ring that seemed too big for her delicate hand. But her behavior toward me grew stranger. If Garrett and I were in the same room, she'd physically place herself between us. If he laughed at a joke I made, she would pout for the rest of the evening. I remember one Sunday dinner, I was telling a story about a difficult case I'd seen during my hospital volunteer work. Garrett was listening, fascinated. Delilah suddenly let out a small cry, claiming she'd bitten her tongue, creating a diversion that immediately drew all attention, and especially Garrett's, back to her. At the time, I thought it was just childish insecurity. I never imagined it was a rehearsal. I never imagined I was being cast as the villain in a play she was writing, a tragedy where I was the only one who didn't know my lines. It was a Tuesday night in October of my senior year of college, a night that began as ordinary as any other. I'd just survived a marathon 12-hour clinical rotation at the hospital, a grueling shift in the ER that left me bone-tired but exhilarated. This was my future, my calling. My feet were throbbing, my mind a jumble of medical terminology and patient charts, and my only thought was of a hot shower and my bed. As I walked through the dim, echoing concrete of the hospital parking garage, I felt a sense of deep satisfaction. The hard work was paying off. The plan was on track. I got into my reliable old Honda Civic, the car that had seen me through late-night study sessions and early morning shifts, and pulled out my phone to let my mom know I was heading home. That's when my world tilted on its axis. My screen was a blinding cascade of notifications. 37 missed calls. 54 text messages. It looked like my phone had suffered a digital seizure. My blood ran cold as I scanned the previews. They were from everyone, my parents, my aunts, uncles, cousins, even my mother's best friend. The messages were a chaotic chorus of fury and confusion. From my Aunt Kate, "How could you do this to your family, Adeline?" From my Uncle Mike, "You better have a good explanation, or so help me God." From a family friend, "I am so disappointed in you. We thought we knew you." And the most chilling, from my mother, "You have broken your father's heart. You've broken all our hearts." My own heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. My first, terrifying thought was that someone was hurt, that there had been an accident. I dialed my father's number, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the screen. He answered on the first ring. The silence on the other end was more terrifying than screaming. "Where are you?" His voice wasn't his own. It was a flat, dead weapon, stripped of all warmth, all familiarity. "I'm in the car. I just left the hospital," I stammered. "Dad, what's happened? Is everyone okay? Did something happen to Grandma?" Get home, he said, the words clipped and sharp. Now. And don't even think about going anywhere else. He hung up. I sat there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, a sound of utter finality. I tried my mom. Straight to voicemail. I tried my Aunt Kate, who had always been my confidant. Voicemail. It was a coordinated, deliberate wall of silence. In the space of a single shift, I had been digitally exiled. The 20-minute drive home was the longest of my life. I drove on autopilot, my mind a whirlwind of frantic, nonsensical speculation. Had I failed an exam and somehow they'd found out? Did I say something to offend someone at our last family dinner? I went through every interaction, every conversation, every possibility, and came up with nothing. As I turned onto our familiar, tree-lined street, a wave of nausea washed over me. Our house, normally dark and quiet at this hour, was blazing with lights. The driveway was packed with cars, a grim assembly of my extended family's vehicles. This wasn't a discussion. This was an intervention. An ambush. I parked on the street, my legs feeling like lead as I got out of the car. Every window on my street seemed to have a curtain twitching. The Sterling family was having a crisis, and the whole neighborhood had a front row seat. I walked up the stone path, each step heavier than the last, my keys trembling in my hand. Before I could even put the key in the lock, the heavy oak door was yanked open. My Uncle Mike, my father's younger brother, stood there, his face flushed and blotchy with rage. He was a construction contractor with a short fuse, and he'd never particularly liked my book smarts. He grabbed my upper arm, his thick fingers digging into my flesh. "You have some goddamn nerve," he spat, his breath hot and sour with whiskey. He pulled me into the foyer and shoved me towards the living room. "Get in there. They're all waiting for you." The scene that greeted me was something out of a nightmare. The entire clan was assembled, a silent, grim-faced tribunal. My mother was on the sofa, her face puffy and ravaged from crying, clutching a wad of tissues. My father stood like a statue by the fireplace, his jaw tight, his eyes like chips of flint. My grandparents sat stiffly on the love seat, their faces etched with confusion and deep disappointment. Aunts, uncles, they were all there, their faces a mixture of anger and morbid curiosity. And in the center of the room, enthroned in my father's favorite leather armchair, was Delilah. She was wrapped in a blanket, her face buried in the shoulder of her fiancé, Garrett, who sat on the armrest, stroking her hair. She was sobbing, but they were the practiced, theatrical sobs of a seasoned performer. Garrett, for his part, looked pale and terrified, refusing to meet my eyes. The moment I stepped into the room, a hush fell. It was a thick, suffocating silence, broken only by Delilah's gulping breaths. Every eye was on me, and in them, I saw a unanimous, unshakable verdict of guilt. "What is going on?" I finally managed to say, my voice a pathetic squeak. "Will someone please tell me what's happening?" My mother lifted her head, and the venom in her eyes was shocking. "As if you don't know," she hissed. "How could you, Adeline? How could you do that to your own sister? The one we brought into our home, the one you were supposed to love and protect? Protect her from what?" I cried, my voice rising in panic. "I don't understand." My father took a menacing step forward, his hands clenched. The controlled, dignified lawyer was gone, replaced by a stranger incandescent with rage. "Stop playing the innocent, Adeline. It's over. Delilah told us everything." He paused, letting the weight of his words fill the room. "She told us about you and Garrett." The world seemed to lurch and spin. I stared at him, my brain short-circuiting, unable to form a coherent thought. "Me and Garrett? What about us? We barely speak." From the armchair, Delilah's sob escalated into a full-blown wail. "Stop lying," she shrieked, her voice muffled. Tell them how you cornered him in the kitchen last week and told him he was too good for me. Tell them how you said he needed a woman who could keep up with him intellectually. That's not what I said. I protested, trying to remember the conversation. We had been talking about his college applications. I'd encouraged him to apply to a better school than he was considering. I was trying to help him. Help him? My father sneered. Is that what you call it? She told us how you waited until you knew she was out with her friends. How you knew he was coming over to get help with his application essay. How you were waiting for him, wearing that little black dress you know he likes. I was wearing scrubs. I shouted, the absurdity of it all making me feel hysterical. I came home from the hospital to grab a textbook. I was here for 10 minutes. Delilah lifted her face, a perfect mask of tragedy. Tell them how you threw yourself at him, Adeline. How you told him you could give him things I couldn't. How you took him upstairs to your room. She buried her face again, her shoulders shaking violently. The accusation, so vile and unthinkable, sucked the air from my lungs. I felt like I was drowning. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, no, no. That is an evil, vicious lie. I would never. Garrett. I turned to him, my eyes begging, pleading with him to end this madness. Garrett, tell them. Tell them she is lying. He finally looked up, his face a miserable portrait of guilt and fear. He couldn't look at me. His gaze shifted to my father, then back to the top of Delilah's head. He swallowed hard and mumbled, his voice so low it was almost inaudible, I'm so sorry, Richard. She came onto me so strong. I didn't know what to do. I messed up. I'm so sorry. It was a confession. A false, cowardly confession, but a confession nonetheless. And it was the sound of my life ending. A collective gasp went through the room. My Uncle Mike let out a roar of fury. My mother let out a strangled shriek and dissolved into fresh hysterics. I stood there, frozen in the crossfire, utterly defenseless. I tried to argue, to present the facts. I have proof. My hospital logs, my time cards, my professors. They can all verify where I was. But it was useless. It was like trying to reason with a hurricane. They didn't want facts. They wanted a villain. And Delilah had served me up on a silver platter. That's when my father, Richard Sterling, a man who had never raised a hand to me in my life, a man whose entire career was built on logic and reason, completely lost control. He strode across the room in 2 long steps. His face was a mask of pure hatred. I didn't even have time to flinch. He drew back his arm and slapped me across the face, hard. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. My head snapped back, the force of it staggering me. A sharp, metallic taste filled my mouth. I raised a trembling hand to my cheek, which was already starting to burn and throb. I stared at my father, the man who was supposed to be my protector, and saw only a stranger filled with a terrifying rage. Get your things, he snarled, his voice a low, guttural growl that I had never heard before. Get out. My world had been reduced to that single, brutal moment. The sting on my cheek, the taste of blood, and the look of utter contempt in my father's eyes. I tried to speak, to plead one last time, but no words came out. What was there to say? The trial was over. The verdict had been delivered. I had been sentenced. Dad, please, I finally whispered, the tears I had been holding back now streaming down my face, stinging the raw skin on my cheek. This is a mistake. A terrible mistake. You know me. I thought I did, he said, his voice cold as stone. He turned his back on me and walked to the hall closet, pulling out 2 black trash bags. He tossed them onto the floor in front of me. Moments ago, your mother went upstairs. She has gathered your essentials. I watched in a state of numb disbelief as my mother came down the stairs, her face set and hard. She wasn't carrying my cherished photo albums or the awards I'd won. Her arms were filled with random piles of clothes, my textbooks, my laptop. She didn't look at me as she began to viciously stuff them into the trash bags, the plastic crinkling loudly in the tense silence. It was like she was disposing of contaminated waste. My father then walked over to the small table where I'd left my purse. He picked it up and unceremoniously dumped its contents onto the polished wood. With cold precision, he plucked up the credit card he co-signed for me, my health insurance card, my car insurance card. He held them up for a moment, then took a pair of scissors from a nearby drawer and cut each one into tiny pieces. He pushed my driver's license and the few crumpled bills I had towards me. "These are yours," he said. "The rest is ours." He grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight, and half-dragged, half-pushed me toward the front door. "You are no longer a member of this family," he said, his voice low and final. "You are no longer our daughter. As of this moment, you are nothing to us." He wrenched the door open and shoved me out into the cold night air. I stumbled on the top step, catching myself just before I fell. The 2 trash bags, holding the pathetic remnants of my 22-year-old life, were thrown out after me. They landed on the perfectly manicured lawn with a soft, final thud. The heavy door slammed shut. I heard the deadbolt slide into place, a sound that echoed the final closing of a prison cell door. I was locked out. Not just from the house, but from my life, my family, my past, and my future. I sank down onto the cold, damp grass, my cheek throbbing, my heart a hollow, aching void. The porch light cast a harsh spotlight on my humiliation, while inside, the family I had loved and trusted was comforting the girl who had just murdered my soul. That first night is a blur of shock and aimless motion. I remember sitting in my car for what felt like hours, parked a block away from the house that was no longer my home. I watched as, one by one, the cars of my relatives pulled out of the driveway and drove away, leaving me alone in the dark. I had nowhere to go. I couldn't call a friend. What would I say? "Hi, my family just disowned me because my sister told a lie and they all believed her?" It sounded insane. I ended up driving to the 24-hour university library, a place that had always been a sanctuary for me. I found an empty corral in a deserted section of the stacks and just sat there, surrounded by the silent, sleeping books. I didn't cry. I was in a state of clinical shock, my mind replaying the events of the evening on a loop, analyzing each word, each expression, searching for a logic that wasn't there. I stayed there until a security guard gently told me the library was closing for a few hours before the morning rush. The next few weeks were a descent into a bureaucratic hell I was completely unprepared for. The first blow came from the university. I received a cold, formal email informing me that, due to the withdrawal of my family's financial support and a formal complaint lodged with the dean's office regarding a serious ethical breach, my scholarship had been suspended. My college fund, which I hadn't even needed, was gone. My parents had liquidated it. I was disenrolled from all my classes, just months shy of graduation. My dream of being a doctor, the central pillar of my identity, crumbled into dust. With the few $100s I had in my checking account, I found a room to rent. It wasn't an apartment, it was a cramped, depressing room in a shared house in a rough part of town. The carpet was stained, the window looked out onto a brick wall, and the place always smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and regret. I sold my textbooks, my laptop, anything of value just to make the security deposit and first month's rent. Then came the job hunt. My impressive resume was now a useless piece of paper. I needed cash, and I needed it now. I swallowed my pride and started applying for jobs I never in a million years thought I would have to consider. I became a waitress at a greasy spoon diner, a job that involved mopping up spilled coffee and smiling through the condescending remarks of tired, angry customers. My first day was a disaster. I spilled a tray of drinks, got an order wrong, and was yelled at by the grizzled owner until I wanted to crawl into a hole. That night, I went home to my sad little room, my feet aching and my clothes smelling of fried onions, and I ate a dinner of saltine crackers and tap water. To make ends meet, I took a second job cleaning office buildings from midnight to 6 a.m. My life became a grueling, 20-hour-a-day cycle of mind-numbing labor. I'd finish my shift at the diner, take a bus across town to the office park, and spend the night emptying trash cans and scrubbing toilets. I was perpetually exhausted, running on cheap coffee and sheer desperation. The bright, promising medical student was gone, replaced by a sleep-deprived ghost who moved through the world unnoticed. The loneliness was a physical ache. I tried calling a few friends from college. The conversations were awkward and short. The story had spread, twisted and embellished with each telling. I was the manipulative sociopath, the homewrecker. No one wanted to be associated with me. One girl, someone I had considered a close friend, told me bluntly, "Look, Adeline, I don't know what to believe, but my parents said I should probably keep my distance." That call was the last I ever made. I understood. I was radioactive. For agonizing months passed. Then, my old, reliable Honda Civic died. The transmission gave out with a final, shuddering groan. The mechanic laughed when I asked for a repair estimate. "Honey," he said, "it would cost more to fix this thing than it's worth. You need a new car." A new car. It was as attainable as a trip to the moon. Without transportation, I lost the office cleaning job. My meager income was cut in half. A week later, the eviction notice appeared on my door. I had failed. The world had chewed me up and spit me out. I was officially homeless, with nothing but a suitcase of worn-out clothes and a heart full of scar tissue. Life on the streets is a special kind of hell. It's not just the cold or the hunger, it's the invisibility. You cease to be a person. You become an obstacle on the sidewalk, a problem for people to ignore. I learned to sleep in 24-hour bus stations, sitting upright, my suitcase clutched to my chest, pretending to be waiting for a bus that would never come. I learned which public bathrooms were the safest to wash up in and which soup kitchens gave the most generous portions. Shame became my constant companion. Every bite of food I didn't pay for felt like a failure. Every person who averted their eyes as I passed was another small cut to my soul. The final, definitive blow came on a cold, rainy November night. I had found what I thought was a relatively safe place to sleep for a few hours, a covered bus stop in a quiet, deserted commercial area. I was huddled on the bench, trying to use my thin jacket as a blanket, when I was jolted awake by the sound of shattering glass. It was my own scream. A man was standing over me, his face obscured by a hoodie. He grabbed my suitcase and my purse. I was too terrified to fight. He took everything, my clothes, my ID, the last $12 I had to my name, and a small, faded photo of my grandparents that I had kept in my wallet. He took the last remnants of Adeline Sterling. He shoved me hard against the bus stop wall, and my head hit the plexiglass with a sickening crack. Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain. I lay there on the cold, wet concrete, my head spinning, a fresh wave of pain radiating from my ribs where I had landed. It wasn't the physical pain that broke me. It was the absolute finality of it all. I had nothing left. No home, no money, no identity, no hope. The world had made it clear, there was no place in it for me. It was in that moment, lying in a puddle of dirty rainwater, that the thought of ending it all ceased to be a vague, desperate idea and became a calm, logical plan. After the robbery, something inside me didn't just break, it turned to dust. The will to fight, the instinct to survive, it was all gone. I spent the next day wandering in a fog of pain and despair. My head throbbed, my ribs ached with every breath, and a cold, profound hopelessness settled deep in my bones. The world seemed to be moving in slow motion around me, a movie I was no longer a part of. As dusk fell, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gray, my aimless wandering led me to the edge of the city, to an old, industrial bridge that spanned the dark, churning waters of the Cuyahoga River. I stood there for what felt like hours, leaning against the cold, damp railing, watching the river flow below. It looked so quiet, so final. An escape. An end to the relentless pain. With a strange sense of calm, I climbed over the rusted safety railing. My movements were slow, deliberate. I stood on the narrow concrete ledge, the wind tearing at my clothes, the city lights a distant, indifferent blur. Below me, the black water waited. I closed my eyes. I thought of my parents' faces, contorted with hatred. I thought of Delilah's triumphant, tear-stained smile. And I thought of the person I used to be, a girl so full of life and promise. A girl who is now a ghost. I took a shaky breath, ready to let go, ready for the silence. It's a hell of a night to go for a swim. The voice was gravelly, rough, and so unexpected it sent a jolt of shock through me. I gasped, my hands flying back to grip the railing, my knuckles white. I turned and saw a man standing a few feet away. He was old, maybe in his 70s, wiry and weathered like an old tree, with deep lines etched around eyes that were surprisingly kind. He was holding a steaming paper cup that smelled of coffee. "Go away," I croaked, my voice a rusty hinge. "Afraid I can't do that," he said, his voice calm, as if we were just two strangers commenting on the weather. He took a slow, non-threatening step closer. "See, the way I figure it, now that I've seen you, I'm part of this. If I walk away, I spend the rest of my short, miserable life wondering if I could have done something. And frankly, I've got enough regrets to deal with." He held out the paper cup. "This is coffee. It's terrible, but it's hot. Drink it. You look like you need it more than I do." Every instinct told me to scream at him, to tell him to leave me alone. But I didn't. There was no pity in his eyes, just a sort of weary, practical empathy. I reached out a trembling hand and took the cup. The warmth was a shock to my frozen fingers, a small, tangible anchor in a world that had come unmoored. His name was Arthur. He told me he owned a small, 24-hour diner at the end of the bridge, a place called the Diner Light. He didn't ask me my name. He didn't ask why a bruised and battered young woman was standing on the wrong side of a bridge railing in the middle of the night. He just looked at my split lip and the darkening bruise on my cheek and said, "My grill cook called in sick tonight. I could use someone to flip burgers and scrub pots. The pay is crap, but it's cash at the end of the shift." It was the most bizarre, most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to me. It wasn't charity. It was an offer. A job. A reason to exist for the next 8 hours. It was a lifeline, thrown by a gruff old stranger. And I took it. With my whole body aching, I somehow found the strength to climb back over the railing onto the solid ground of the sidewalk. I followed him, the terrible coffee warming my hands, towards the faded neon glow of the diner. The Diner Light was everything a diner should be. It smelled of old coffee, sizzling bacon, and a deep, comforting sense of permanence. The red vinyl on the booths was cracked, the chrome was a little dull, but it was warm and bright and felt like the safest place on earth. Arthur wordlessly pointed me towards the kitchen, handed me a greasy apron, and showed me how to work the industrial dishwasher. He saw me wince as I lifted a heavy rack of plates and, without a word, he took a first aid kit from under the counter and cleaned and bandaged the cut on my lip himself. I worked through the night in a sort of dream state, the simple, repetitive motions of washing and scrubbing a strange kind of therapy. At 6 a.m., as the first hint of dawn was breaking, Arthur counted out a small stack of crumpled bills and slid them across the stainless steel counter to me. "There's a room upstairs," he said, his back to me as he started brewing a fresh pot of coffee. "It ain't the Ritz. The plumbing makes some funny noises. But the bed is clean and the door has a lock. You can stay. The rent is working 2 extra shifts a week." And just like that, I had a home. Arthur never asked about my past. He seemed to have a silent understanding that some stories are too heavy to be told. He gave me a job, a safe place to sleep, and, most importantly, he treated me with a basic human dignity I had forgotten existed. He was gruff, sarcastic, and complained constantly, but beneath the thorny exterior was a heart of solid gold. He became my protector, my mentor, and the father I thought I'd had. I lived in that tiny room above the diner for over a year. My life found a new, quiet rhythm. I worked the night shift, took online classes at the local community college during the day, and slowly, painstakingly, began to piece my life back together. The work was hard, but it was honest. I saved every penny I could, building a small nest egg, a wall of financial security around myself. The bruises faded. The nightmares didn't disappear, but they came less frequently. I was surviving. One Saturday afternoon, a young man came into the diner, grumbling about a leaky pipe his uncle had been nagging him to fix. It was Miles, Arthur's nephew. He was a high school history teacher, with a kind, gentle face and a quiet intelligence that was immediately appealing. He had his uncle's good heart, but none of his prickly edges. He started stopping by more often, ostensibly to help Arthur with odd jobs, but I noticed he always timed his visits for my shifts. Our friendship began in the quiet lulls of the diner, over shared pots of coffee after the lunch rush. He'd sit at the counter while I polished silverware, and he would tell me about his students, about the historical figures he admired, about his passion for making the past come alive. He was a good listener, and he never pushed me to talk about myself. He seemed content to just know me as I was, Adeline from the diner. For the first time in a very long time, I felt myself begin to trust someone. He was the one who encouraged me to do more with my online classes. "You have a brilliant mind, Adeline," he told me one evening. "You see patterns and solutions where other people just see problems." On his advice, I switched my major from general studies to business management. A new dream began to form, a smaller, more practical dream than being a surgeon, but one that was entirely my own. I started helping Arthur with the diner's finances, creating spreadsheets, finding ways to cut costs and improve efficiency. Arthur grumbled about my fancy college ideas, but I saw the pride in his eyes. He even gave me a promotion, officially making me the diner's manager. Our friendship slowly, naturally, blossomed into love. It was a quiet, gentle love, built not on grand gestures, but on a foundation of shared respect and deep, abiding trust. He was the calm to my storm, the steady hand that held mine when the memories threatened to overwhelm me. But I knew, before I could fully give him my heart, I had to give him my past. The thought of telling him the truth, of seeing his kind face change with doubt or disgust, was terrifying. But he deserved to know who I was, all of it. One cool autumn evening, we were sitting on a bench in a small park, watching the leaves fall. I knew it was time. With my heart pounding, my voice trembling, I told him everything. I started with the snow globe life, the perfect family, the pressure. I told him about Delilah, her jealousy, her lies. I described the scene in the living room, the slap, the trash bags on the lawn, the homelessness, the assault in the alley, the bridge. The entire, ugly, brutal truth came spilling out. I finished my story and fell silent, unable to look at him, bracing myself for the inevitable recoil. He was quiet for a long time, just holding my hand. Finally, he turned to me, his eyes full of an emotion I couldn't read. He gently lifted my chin with his fingers, forcing me to look at him. "Thank you for trusting me with that," he said, his voice thick with sincerity. "Adeline, everything you just told me, it doesn't change a single thing about how I feel about you. In fact, it only makes me love you more. I didn't fall in love with that perfect girl from the perfect family. I fell in love with the woman who is sitting next to me right now. The survivor. The one who went through hell and came out the other side with her kindness and her strength intact." I stared at him, and for the second time in my life, a man's words brought me to tears. But these weren't the tears of a broken victim. These were the tears of a woman who had finally been seen, had finally been believed, had finally been loved for exactly who she was. In that moment, sitting on a park bench with the man who would become my husband, I knew I was finally, truly, safe. I was home. The next 7 years were a testament to the quiet, steady power of rebuilding. Miles and I were married a year later. It wasn't a lavish affair like the one Delilah had planned. It was a small, intimate ceremony held in the backyard of the little 2-bedroom house we'd bought with our combined savings. Arthur, looking uncharacteristically dapper in a borrowed suit, walked me down the aisle. Our friends were the diner's regular customers and a few of Miles's fellow teachers. It was a family we had chosen, a family forged not by blood, but by love and loyalty. My business degree paid off. With a carefully crafted business plan, I secured a loan and, with Arthur as my partner, we began to expand. The diner light became the light grill, a modern, updated version of the classic diner. We opened a second location in a neighboring town, then a third. I discovered a passion and a talent for business that I never knew I had. I loved the logistics, the challenges, the satisfaction of building something from the ground up. I wasn't saving lives as a surgeon, but I was creating jobs, building a community, and crafting a future that was secure and entirely my own. Miles was my constant support. His teacher's salary wasn't huge, but his emotional wealth was immeasurable. He was the calm, steady center of my world. Our life was good. It was filled with the simple, beautiful routines of a happy marriage, cooking dinner together, grading papers at the kitchen table, taking long walks on weekends. The trauma of my past receded, becoming a faint, silvery scar rather than an open wound. I rarely thought about Richard, Carol, and Delilah. They belonged to a different lifetime, a different person. I had a new life, a new identity. I was Adeline, wife, businesswoman, friend. And that was more than enough. I had truly believed that chapter of my life was permanently closed. Then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, a day like any other. I was at our flagship restaurant, deep in a meeting with our food suppliers, negotiating the price of produce. I was in my element, confident, professional, in control. My assistant poked her head into the conference room, her expression apologetic. "Adeline, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a call for you on your private line." The woman said it's a family emergency. A jolt of pure adrenaline shot through me. My mind immediately went to Miles or Arthur. An accident. A health crisis. I excused myself, my heart pounding, and hurried to my office, snatching the phone off the receiver. "This is Adeline," I said, my voice tight with anxiety. A hesitant, shaky voice on the other end answered. "Adeline, honey, it's me. It's Mom." The world seemed to stop. Time itself froze. I hadn't heard that voice in 7 years, but it was as unmistakable as a fingerprint. It was the voice that had called me a liar, the voice that had stood by as I was thrown out into the night. My meticulously constructed new life felt suddenly fragile, like a glass wall with a crack spreading through it. Every instinct screamed at me to hang up, to sever the connection, to protect the peace I had fought so hard to win. But I couldn't. I was frozen, a prisoner of a dark, morbid curiosity. "What do you want?" I asked. My voice was a stranger's, cold, flat, and hard as steel. "Oh, Adeline, please, don't hang up," she begged, her voice dissolving into a pathetic sob. "I know I don't deserve to talk to you, but please. We need you. It's important." "We haven't spoken in 7 years," I repeated, the words like ice chips. "Nothing could be that important." "It's about Delilah," she choked out. "She confessed, Adeline. A few months ago. She finally told us the truth. She admitted that she made it all up. Every last word of it was a lie." The silence in my office was absolute. The hum of the computer, the distant clatter of the kitchen, it all faded away. I had known it was a lie. Of course, I had. But to hear it confirmed, to have the words spoken aloud by my own mother after 7 years of stony, unforgiving silence, it wasn't vindication. It wasn't relief. It was like being struck by lightning for a second time, a jolt that reawakened every dormant nerve ending of pain and betrayal. My mind flashed back to the bruises, the hunger, the cold, the terror. All of it. For nothing. "Adeline? Are you there?" my mother pleaded. "Please, honey, say something." I took a deep breath, and with a steady hand, I placed the receiver back in its cradle. I hung up on her and on the ghost of the life she had helped to destroy. For the next 2 weeks, my phone became a weapon used against me. The calls and texts were relentless. They came from my mother, my father, aunts and uncles I hadn't heard from since the day of my exile. They were all filled with frantic, self-serving apologies and desperate pleas to talk. I ignored them all. I discussed it with Miles, my rock, and with Arthur, my unlikely father figure. They both said the same thing: "It's your decision, kid. We've got your back, no matter what." Finally, I knew I had to face them. Not for them, but for me. I needed to close this chapter on my own terms. I sent a single, blunt text to my mother, the Daily Grind coffee shop. Main Street. This Sunday. 2 p.m. Just you, Dad, and Delilah. I will not be alone. This is your only chance. That Sunday was cold and overcast, a perfect mirror for my mood. Miles's hand was a warm, steady presence in mine as we walked into the coffee shop. Arthur was already there, seated at a table in the back corner with a clear view of the entrance, a silent, watchful sentinel. He gave me a short, reassuring nod. My stomach was a tight, churning ball of old anger and fresh anxiety. They were on time. When they walked in, I was shocked by their appearance. They looked broken. My father, Richard, once a powerful and imposing man, was stooped and thin, his expensive suit replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting blazer. My mother, Carol, who had worshipped at the altar of youth and beauty, looked frail and old, the lines of stress and worry on her face unconcealed by makeup. And Delilah, now 24, was a ghost of her former dramatic self. She was pale and gaunt, her eyes red-rimmed and fixed on the floor. My mother saw me and her face crumpled. She rushed forward, arms outstretched. "Oh, Adeline," she began. I held up a hand, stopping her cold. "Sit down," I commanded. My voice was calm and controlled, the voice I used with difficult vendors, and it had the desired effect. They all sat, a trio of chastened ghosts at my table. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, my father spoke, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Adeline, we are so sorry." "There are no words." "Then don't try to find any," I cut him off. "Just tell me why I'm here." "Why now, after 7 years?" He recounted the story of Delilah's confession. Her engagement to Garrett had fallen apart. The years of guilt had apparently eaten away at her, leading to a complete breakdown where the whole sordid truth had come out. I turned my full attention to my sister for the first time. "Look at me, Delilah," I said. She flinched, but slowly, she raised her eyes to mine. "Why?" I asked again. "I need to hear it from you." "I was jealous," she whispered, the words barely audible. "You had everything. You were smart, you were successful, you were perfect. They adored you. And Garrett. I saw the way he looked at you. Not with desire, but with awe. And I hated it. I was so afraid of losing him, of losing my place. I just wanted them all to love me more. To choose me." She started to cry, pathetic, watery tears. "I never thought it would go so far. I thought they'd yell at you, and then it would be over. But it just kept going. And I was too much of a coward to stop it." "And you too?" I said, my voice like ice as I turned to my parents. A single phone call. That's all it would have taken. A single call to the hospital to verify my alibi. Did you ever, for 1 second, consider that your perfect daughter might be telling the truth? My mother just shook her head, sobbing into her hands. My father looked down, shamefaced. We were so angry," he stammered. "We believed we were protecting her." "You weren't protecting her," I said, my voice rising. "You were enabling her. And you were sacrificing me." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. Do you have any idea what my life has been like? I lost everything. My education, my future, my home. I slept on benches. I was beaten and robbed. I stood on a bridge, ready to die, because the two people in this world who were supposed to love me unconditionally had thrown me away like I was garbage. My father flinched as if I'd struck him. My mother's sobs grew louder. We know we made a terrible mistake, she cried. We want to fix it. We want to help you. Help me? I asked, a cold knot of realization forming in my stomach. And how do you plan to do that? That's when the real truth came out. My father, it turned out, had been forced into early retirement after his firm laid him off. He'd made a series of disastrous investments, trying to recoup his losses. They had sold the big house years ago. Now, they were on the verge of being evicted from the small, cramped condo they rented. Delilah, without Garrett's financial support, had dropped out of community college and was working a dead-end retail job. They weren't here for absolution. They were here for a lifeline. Your father's business ventures have failed, my mother admitted, her voice thick with shame. We're going to lose everything, Adeline. We have no one else to turn to. We heard you've done very well with your restaurants. And there it was. The final, ugly, transactional truth. They didn't want their daughter back. They wanted a bank. I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a raw, broken, bitter laugh that clawed its way up from the deepest, most wounded part of my soul. It was the laugh of a woman who had finally understood everything. Let me see if I have this straight, I said, my laughter dying down, replaced by a chilling calm. You cast me out, you disown me, you leave me to rot for 7 years. But now that you're broke, and you've discovered that the daughter you threw away has managed to build a successful life without you, you suddenly remember you have a family? You come crawling back, not for forgiveness, but for a handout? We're your family, my father pleaded, his voice pathetic. No, I said, and the finality in my voice made them all flinch. I stood up from the table, my movements slow and deliberate. You lost the right to call yourselves my family 7 years ago, in our living room. You made your choice. I looked at Delilah. I forgive you, I said, and to my own surprise, I realized it was true. You were a child, a deeply insecure and cruel child, but a child nonetheless. Your mistake was born of weakness. Then I turned to my parents, my eyes hard as diamonds. But you too. You were the adults. You were my parents. Your one sacred duty was to protect me, and you failed in the most spectacular way imaginable. You didn't just fail me, you actively participated in my destruction. I don't forgive you. I don't think I ever can. I took a $20 bill from my wallet and laid it on the table. For the coffee, I said. We turned to leave. My mother, in a last, desperate act, lunged forward and grabbed my arm. Please, she begged, her face a mess of tears and desperation. Don't leave like this. Tell us what we can do. What do you want from us? I stopped. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then into her eyes. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I wanted. It wasn't revenge, not really. It was justice. I want you to remember, I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of every tear I had ever shed. I want you to lie awake at night in your cramped condo, worrying about how you're going to pay the rent. I want you to feel the shame of asking for help and being turned away. I want you to know the cold, gnawing fear of losing everything you have. I want you to feel, just for a moment, a fraction of the helplessness and despair you sentenced me to for 7 years. Maybe then, I finished, pulling my arm gently but firmly from her grasp, you'll finally understand the gravity of what you did. And then, with Miles's arm securely around me and Arthur walking beside us like a guardian angel, I walked out of that coffee shop, out of their lives, and into the bright, clear light of my own future. I never looked back. If you're still listening, if my story has touched you in any way, please do me a small favor. Like this video and comment with the number 1 down below. It lets me know that you've given me a like, and it tells me that you've been here with me through this whole journey. Your support means more than you can possibly know. It's a huge encouragement. Just comment the number 1, and then listen as I tell you how things turned out. That meeting was 2 years ago. It was the last time I ever saw them. I heard through the grapevine of our old town, people love to gossip, after all, that they lost the condo a few months later. My father, Richard Sterling, the once powerful lawyer, now works as a part-time greeter at a big-box hardware store. My mother cleans houses for some of the same women she used to host for charity luncheons. The ultimate humiliation for a woman who lived for appearances. Delilah is still working retail. I heard she and Garrett tried to get back together, but their relationship was built on a foundation of lies and weakness, and it eventually collapsed for good. Sometimes I feel a flicker of something when I think of them, but it isn't pity. It's a detached, clinical sadness for the people they chose to be. I might reach out to Delilah someday. Not to reconcile, but perhaps to have a final, honest conversation, adult to adult. But I'm not ready for that yet. My life, on the other hand, is full. It's full of love, laughter, and the chaotic joy of running a business that continues to grow. Arthur is still grumbling and complaining, but he's a doting grandfather figure to our child. Miles is the best man I have ever known, my partner in every sense of the word. Our home is a sanctuary, a place where honesty and love are the only rules. And the best part, the epilogue that makes all the suffering worth it? I'm pregnant. We're expecting our first child, a little girl, in the spring. As I sit here now, in the quiet of the nursery we've painted a soft, sunny yellow, feeling her kick beneath my hand, I know my life's true purpose. It's not about success or revenge. It's about breaking the cycle. It's about being the parent I never had. It's about creating a world for my daughter where she will always be believed, always be protected, and always, always be loved unconditionally. My past doesn't define me anymore. The scars are there, a permanent reminder of the fire I walked through. But they are also a testament to the fact that I survived. I rebuilt my life from the ashes, and I built it stronger and more beautiful than the one that was taken from me. Thank you, truly, for listening to my story. If you've ever been made to feel small or worthless by the people who were supposed to love you most, please know this, you are not alone, and your story is not over. Share your thoughts in the comments below. It's a powerful thing to know that we're all in this together.